So we're here, and the title that was up there, we don't know the winner yet, right? We don't know the winner. Is Pray the Vote. And that's really where it has to land. Because for us, as Catholics especially, the church never tells us how to vote. The church gives us the tools to be able to discern that. And discernment is a very key skill throughout life. Because discernment is not just prudential reasoning. Prudential reasoning is you're going to choose between choice A and choice B. So it's really a choice between two things. It's more than that. Prudential reasoning is that choice between two things, but discernment really is, how is the Lord guiding me towards a decision that, in the case of your vocation of life, how it is you can serve the Lord, how it is that God is calling you in your vocation, in what the Lord wants you to do with your life. Well, discernment can be about other decisions too, specifically about how you would judge who best may be a good steward in local government, state government, and federal government, all three. And so it's the thing about it, though, the challenge is that it takes some work. Many times people say, well, Msgr, I just want you to get me who I should vote for. And I can't do that. I would love to, but I can't do that. And because you have to decide. And what a great privilege that is. When I've had multiple associates here with me at our parish, and a lot of them are not yet American citizens. And one of them, you may remember, anybody remember Father Matthew Wafor? You remember him? And I remember him saying to me, he said, Msgr, this is the best country in the world. He said, you have all of these freedoms that in Nigeria, which is where he grew up, he said, we don't have that. He said, if I want to go to the embassy to get my visa extended, which he had to, he said, I have to take a plane to go on a 2-hour trip to where the embassy is in Lagos, capital of Nigeria. So I have to take a plane to do that. It's only 2 hours to drive. But he said, in that 2 hours, if I drove it on the road, I would get attacked, especially as a Catholic priest, because of the lack of religious freedom in that particular area of Nigeria. So people don't realize what a blessing it is. And so we have the freedom to be able to do that, to be able to vote, to be able to participate in freely in elections. That's such a blessing. And so what it takes is this discernment to look at how it is that we should then, if we have a slate of candidates, which typically obviously the presidential election, it's a choice between largely two, but sometimes there's an independent in there, or there's another party that can extend the slate. But then it gets more complicated because a lot of times you have all of these local, county, and state elections as well. So there's a whole list of candidates for different positions, even for judges. Judges is a lot of different possible candidates. So you have to look at what are the positions that these people have on a variety of issues. And so one thing I've been putting in our bulletin for about the last 6 weeks is just a selection of some of those issues that the church suggests that we would look at as part of that discernment. And there's one piece, though, that helps to guide even that selection of those issues. And there's something that we call in the moral life a hierarchy of truths. And hierarchy of truths, which says to us, in other words, what is the something that's at the top? So hierarchy means that there's a list. And what would be considered at the top? And so the hierarchy of truth says what's considered at the top, which has to be considered first along with other things, but because of its importance, is the sanctity of human life. That has to be considered first, from the moment of conception to natural death. And so that would be at the top. But also how human life is respected, not just at its beginning and its end, but then how do we handle issues of people who are living in poverty, people who don't have food that they need, people who don't have adequate housing, people who have some of the basics that are a particular challenge for them in their life. How is a candidate addressing some of those challenges that are fundamental to human life? So the hierarchy of truths begins to look at that. It begins to look at other issues too, such as foreign policy, such as a big one here that's really getting a lot of focus, which is great, immigration. That's a major focus, and which is a good thing because it's a major problem and has been for, 30 or 40, 50 years. It's been a very large challenge. And especially today, talk about respect and care for the dignity of human life. We see that the issue of human trafficking. That's another piece that's connected to that. The estimates say some over 300,000 children are unaccompanied. And what happens to them? They get trafficked. And it's amazing how big of an industry that is. And so you can see there's these hierarchy of truths that help to inform us. And we have to then look at all of how each particular candidate may address these things. Now, obviously, some of those candidates aren't going to be able to address all of those because they're not things that necessarily that they would deal with. So, like, for example, we have obviously a presidential election this year, and they would be able to, they should be able to address a whole variety of those issues. But then we also have other elections going on, elected officials, like for the Department of Labor. They wouldn't necessarily deal with foreign policy. So there's things that are particular to what candidates are going to have responsibility for, that we have to be able to look at what are those issues that are impacted by their particular possible leadership. What are the positions on that? So that's kind of an overall piece. Then we have to discern that. We have to see how it is that they measure up on the hierarchy of truths, and then we have to pray about it. And we have to pray about it in such a way that we're not cooperating with any kind of intrinsic evil. And that's a difficult one, because a lot of times you may have candidates where, some of their positions on life are in conflict, not just with the church, but all the candidates may have that conflict. And so what do you do then? Well, then you have to look a little deeper into some of the other connected issues. Issues like perhaps of foreign policy, or issues of immigration reform, issues that have to deal with how they would handle a whole variety of different things. So that begins to be then a discernment as to who best might handle that? And how is it that they can affect leadership? How is it that they can put the people in a position to be able to assist in making those decisions? So you have to kind of weigh all of that out. And always with that hierarchy of truths in mind. So that's just kind of a general way of approaching a piece here. So I'm going to need somebody to come up and pick one out of here. You want to do it? All right, good job. Yep, just good.
Are Catholic voters single issue voters, and is it okay to be a single issue voter?
No, you keep. Thank you. Well, it can be that way, but usually it needs to be a little bit more broad, and that there need to be multiple things that are considered. Now, it will depend on what that issue is, and the question didn't really specify it. Was somebody here that had that question? To get a little bit more specific. So it can be. Like, for example, I mean, there might be somebody who says that my single issue is going to be about the respect for life from the moment of conception. And that could be something that's just key for them. But we would, now, while that's at the top of the hierarchy of truths, we would invite the person to look at the rest of what the candidate might have to say about other issues that also might have to do with respect of human life, because they could be in favor of as well in favor of the death penalty, which the church under the leadership of St. John Paul II said no, we're more in favor of preserving that life imprisonment without parole, so giving the opportunity for conversion, because respecting that life and its dignity. So you can see how it begins to run into other issues that then literally you have to then discern. Okay. All right, who wants to come up next? Good job. All right, good.
When it comes to abortion, are you with or against it? Why?
Am I with or against abortion? Well, as a priest, I don't know how you could be in favor of it, because it's the beginning of human life. So, yeah, it's kind of a simple answer. And because, we believe that life begins at the very moment of conception. It's very interesting, some of the studies that have been done on that. I was just commenting, just talking to somebody the other day about that. They've actually put a camera, like a tiny camera, in to see the moment when that fertilization of the egg happens. And you know what? In that very moment when that happens, exactly, you got it. What is it? It's a burst of light. It's actually been recorded. What a beautiful kind of way of capturing that reality of the beginning of human life that begins at that moment where that individual is a soul and where they're unique and in their genetic makeup, and then grow into the people that, like all of those around us, get to create and be part of God's creation. So a sense of great beauty at the artistry of the Lord. All right, who's next? All right, yes, ma'am.
What political party do Catholics tend to lean more towards? Do you know why?
Huh. That's an interesting one. You know, people seem to think that there's kind of a Catholic bloc. In other words, that Catholics normally congregate in one particular party. I think that used to be true at one time. And I don't think so, not so much anymore. And you know what you're seeing, especially here in North Carolina, you're seeing a lot of people who are independent. And even so, if you are affiliated mainly with one particular party, and while that may be of value to you, you know, what I always try to do in my own life is I always try to look at the individual and to see what it is that they stand for, and try to judge it that way, try to discern it that way, rather than, and there is this option when you vote, you can vote straight party. Like you can go in and with your big ballot, and they're huge, at least they were last time, big ballots. Anybody voted already? Yeah. Are they big? Yeah, it's like a huge piece of paper. And you go in with the pencil, right? And you fill it in. And you can vote straight party line. In other words, if you want to go in and you say, well, I'm just gonna vote for all the Republican candidates, or I'm gonna vote for all the Democratic candidates, you can do that, right? And then the vote, the tabulation will happen where it fills it in automatically. But I think most people try to look at the individual and try to see, how does this individual really reflect what I think is important, and as a person of faith, how really our faith, specifically for us, our Catholic faith, guides who we should support, and how we discern that to be of what's important. And so I don't think there's so much anymore that one particular party that the church, the Catholics in general, support. I think it's kind of broad. Who's next? Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
What are some qualities as Catholics that we must look for in presidential candidates?
Qualities. Okay. I would say certainly an ability to capture and understand and embrace some of the most serious issues that are in front of us. And so they should have a command of those. Because again, you're looking just for somebody, as if the issue is about a presidential candidate, you're looking for somebody who can be a leader. And a leader doesn't mean that you're doing it all yourself. A leader means that you're also inviting others to help you, assist you in that process. So, and that there's an understanding of what the issues are, and also a thoughtful approach to how to handle them. And of course, we would be very concerned with how those issues are approached from a perspective of faith, because some of them, they have to be, at least in our view. And so somebody that has some of those qualities, somebody who is thoughtful, somebody who's discerning, somebody who's perhaps not rash, somebody who is respectful, somebody who listens. There's a whole variety of pieces to that. And somebody who's strong. And because we certainly have a lot of people in terms of others throughout the world who don't necessarily wish us well. And so somebody who can be strong, yet respectful, somebody who can be able to process and come to a decision. All of those are pieces, certainly, that should be not exhaustive, but should be qualities that would contribute to a good candidate. All right. Yes, sir.
As a Catholic, can you vote for someone who doesn't have the same religious views as you?
Sure. Yeah, you can. And that's where that discernment comes in. But you have to be able to weigh those things that are the most important. And of course, in this particular election right now, there are Catholics on the ballot. There are. But there are also many candidates who are not Catholic. And so certainly you can vote for somebody who has a different religious belief than you, but you have to respect that. And that's something that we value highly as Catholics. We respect other people's religious tradition. But that's why, though we would hold that some of the issues that we hold to be the most important aren't from the perspective of importance by way of a political reality. For us, some of these issues, or many of them actually, are from a perspective of the moral life. So something that has to do with our right relationship with the Lord. That's where our position as Catholics tends to place things. And that virtue of right relationship is summed up, it's a biblical notion and summed up in the word justice. That's a virtue. How it is that we have a just relationship between the Lord and one another. So we would hope that some of the issues that we would hold to be as just issues of justice, that a particular candidate, hopefully in their different religious views than us, would have that in common. But like it is with many people where we don't have the same tradition of faith, like maybe, as Catholics we're good friends with somebody who might be Southern Baptist. Southern Baptists aren't going to share necessarily all our religious views. They're just not. But hopefully we can be respectful of one another. And for somebody who is an elected official, they, of course, are going to act from their own conscience, but they also have to respect those that they are representing. So as those who have elected them. So you can vote for somebody who is not necessarily of our same faith tradition. Okay. Who wants to go next? Yes, sir. Careful. Good job. I know.
How does the church decide how to vote?
How does the church decide how to vote? Yeah. Well, that's that discernment issue, so I think we already covered that. All right. How about another? All right. Thank you, ma'am.
How does the separation of church and state inform us as voters?
Interesting question. Separation of church and state. Well, you can get into this a lot of times because people will say, when we have a moral perspective that, you're getting involved, and that moral perspective informs public policy. They'll say, oh, Monsignor, you need to stay out of politics. Well, if it's a moral issue, you can't. And because it's something that is not just public policy, so it's not just a political issue, it's something that has moral implications. And so there necessarily has to be an insertion of what we believe to be issues that are of paramount importance in the public square. Now, like with everybody else, we have the freedom to be able to voice those. And because it's a moral issue for us to be able to strive to influence that public policy towards that moral good. Now, is that always going to happen? Not necessarily. But we think that, and we believe that we should have the freedom as Catholics to be able to participate in that forum. Now, it's interesting here in North Carolina, the history of the church here in our state, it was, I believe, in the 1830s, maybe 40s. Until then, there was a prohibition for Roman Catholics to hold higher office in the state of North Carolina. Prohibition was in the Constitution of the state. And so, and it came in with, there was a judge, and some of you just know his name because there's a lake named after him, Judge William Gaston. So you've heard of Lake Gaston. And he was from New Bern, and he was a Catholic. Some of you know Georgetown University in Washington. He was the first student at that university. And he returned after his college and law school to practice law back in New Bern. And then he was nominated for the Supreme Court in the state of North Carolina. And so in order for him to have that nomination, there had to be an exception to that prohibition for Catholics to hold higher office, because that would have been an appointed office in the state of North Carolina. So there always hasn't been that religious freedom that we want to enjoy in terms of how church and state mix. Sometimes that prohibition can really jeopardize true freedom. And in that case, that was put aside, thanks be to God. And even said in Wilmington, it wasn't in Charlotte, the cathedral. It was deemed to be here in Raleigh, because there was a political party that was very much in power. It wasn't unique here to North Carolina. It was also in the north, but it had an odd name. But it was very much in vogue in the 19th century. It was called the Know Nothing Party. And so it's not named for a political party, right? And but the Know Nothings were vehemently anti-Catholic. Vehemently. And where Catholics were discriminated against, and that was almost enshrined. And so the Holy See, the Vatican, in collaboration with the abbot of Belmont Abbey down in Belmont, North Carolina, and also the Archbishop of Baltimore, who was in charge of North Carolina at the time before it was a diocese. They thought it was important for the cathedral, for the first bishop, to be in Raleigh, about a block away, as it turned out, from the state legislature, so that the bishop could be, not only have a voice, or the possibility of a voice in some of those moral issues, but also be looking out for ways in which perhaps in a society that's supposed to be free, could be looking out for anything that would consider Catholics as second-class citizens. All right, who's next? And how are we doing on time? Yeah. Yes.
So my question is about how we talked a lot about like moral issues, but what about for issues or parts of a platform that aren't necessarily directly related to morals, like economic policy or like climate change?
Well, what I would say is economic policy can definitely be involved with moral issues, because economic policy should embrace the fact that for us as Catholics, one of the moral issues is that we should have a preferential option for the poor. We believe that our faith really dictates that the poor have a special attention from the Lord. And so how public policy affects the poor becomes very, very powerful. Certainly with issues of poverty where people don't have the opportunities that they need by way of housing and education, by way of health, and access to those things become very important. And so that's in that hierarchy of truths. So it does have a moral implication. In other words, we can't be like the priest in the Good Samaritan account, where the person is sitting injured on the side of the road, and the priest just passes, the Levitical priest just passes it by. We can't do that. We have to pay attention. We have to be like the Good Samaritan. And so those for us would be considered moral issues as well. And see, that can be kind of a point of discussion where some people think, again, Father, you're getting involved in politics. You shouldn't do that. That has nothing to do with the church. Well, if somebody says that to you, the poor has nothing to do with the church? Yeah, it does. And so it has something to do with our faith. That's we're called to respond to the needs of all of those most in need. Okay, how are we doing on time? 10 minutes? Okay. Anybody else want to pick one or have a question? What is it? You want to come up? We got a microphone? Where's the microphone? Here it is. Thank you, sir. Hopefully it'll work over there. Doesn't work. Next question. Okay. Who's got a question? You want to pick one out? Somebody want to pick one out?
No.
Want to? Yeah? Okay. Good deal. Thank you. Good job.
What can we do before we are able to vote?
I didn't hear it.
What can we do before we are able to vote?
What can we do before we're able to vote? That's a good question. And I think, I've been putting in the prayers of the faithful here at Cathedral. So the prayers of the faithful are done right after we pray the creed at Mass. And I've been asking the whole assembly, so the group, the congregation that's there for Mass, assembled. I've been asking everybody to pray specifically for that discernment on who may be a good steward to serve in public office, both, you heard it last weekend, in local, county, state, and federal office. So it's very important that that we do that prayer. I think that's probably the most important thing if you're not yet of age to vote. The other thing is you can do is those who you know who are of age, and some of them are your peers at 18. How many people here are 18? We got a few. Yeah, there's a few. So, did you vote already? Not yet? Are you gonna? Good. Because that's one thing you can do. You can encourage your peers who are of age to do that, to exercise that right. It's very important we do that. We can't absent ourselves out of that because we're all part of this great nation. And its strength lies in the fact that we get involved and we have the opportunity to do that. There are people in our world today who would absolutely just could not wait for an opportunity to participate in government like that. And we are so blessed that you have the freedom to be able to do that. And so I think those are amongst the things you could do to pray, encourage, and also maybe begin to practice, especially if you're coming up on your first election. Maybe the next one would be for state government, and federal government would be 2 years, and then 4 years, of course, for a larger election. So you could be doing some preparation. So if you could vote now, who would it be? You could almost practice it. Who would you vote for? And not just, well, I like the way she looks, or I like the way he speaks, or, it can't be like that. No, it's specific issues. Who would you vote for based on the parameters, some of which we talked about tonight? That's a way you can begin to get into that and begin to rehearse how you would participate. The first time I voted, I was a sophomore in college, and when that first time that came up, and it was exciting. I had to vote absentee ballot because I was in Greenville, South Carolina, and I was from northern suburb of Chicago, Glenville, Illinois, and so I had to vote absentee, and but it was great. And I think I'm coming up on I think this is my 12th presidential election, and but it's always good. And I always vote. It's great now you can do it remotely, early voting. I always go on the day, and for us at Cathedral downtown, it's about a block away, so it's easy to do. All right.
One more.
What's that?
One more.
1 minute?
One more question.
One more question. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay, I can't.
Who are you going to vote for in the next election, and how did God help you get to this decision?
So the next election meeting in 2026? In 2026 or 2024? 24. Okay, so the election that's day after tomorrow. Well, it would be unfair for me, even though I'm not sure everybody is curious, it would be unfair for me to tell you who I'm going to vote for. And I wouldn't do that. And, but it's this process of what we've been talking about, some of that, of how I came up with who I'm going to vote for. And I've been talking with different people, and people put a lot of effort into it. They go down and look at all the candidates, and some of them, it's a little difficult to find out what some of their positions are. And, but it takes a bit of research in order to responsibly do that. But like I said, I prayed about it, and I looked at what the Lord wanted me to do, and came to that decision, what I thought would be best, based on what the Lord had guided me in terms of the candidates that are in front of us today. One more question. What's that? One more, okay. We got, yes, sir. Am I influenced by the media? Yeah, I think that's a very good question, because the media does influence, for sure. And you hear this where the word spin, and in other words, they take kind of reality and they kind of shine it up a little bit and make it look really good. Or if it's the opponent, they make it look really bad. And people think, well, that's just, the modern world. Actually, no, it goes back quite a while. And because there was always sort of dirty tricks like that in elections, has been for a long time. And that's some of the beauty. You see some of the debates that have happened in history in our country. You see that some of the toughness of those isn't new. You go back and probably the paradigmatic ones are the Lincoln-Douglas debates. So Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas, some unbelievable debates where they spoke for hours, and like 3-4 hours. And but I think, what you have to do with the media is, and this is true for a lot of things, not just political matters. You can't take somebody else's distillation of what somebody said. Now, it's difficult to understand. I guess you could look at a little bit of that. But you have to listen to exactly what they said. And then be able to say, okay, I'm not sure as a Catholic we could agree with that. Or that's right on target. And so primary source begins to be very important, rather than somebody's distillation on what they would like you to believe was said. Because that's the way, sometimes for people today, their reality is what they've created it to be, rather than what it actually is. And so the primary sources begins to be a very important thing, not just in political matters. It is as well with other things too. It's in the church, because people say, well, I didn't like, what so and so said in the church, and blah blah blah. Well, what do you think they said? And you listen to what they think this person said, and that wasn't it at all. That's just what they believe the person said. Abraham Lincoln said, people believe these things because these are the kind of things people like to believe. It's pretty good, actually. And so primary sources begins to be the most important thing. The person themselves. All right, is that enough? Ready to go home? I bet. Long day. I started with the 7 a.m. Mass. So, Miss Elizabeth, well, there you are. Only say the word.